I think throughout history you'll find certain WrestleManias that are memorable for the good things that happened and the good things that the show accomplished. And then you'll have those shows that are memorable because of just how bad they were and how much of the drizzling shits they were and how little it accomplished, other than it accomplished the fact that it made you remember that it was a terrible show. But then you have, I think, sometimes what are the worst WrestleManias of all, in a sense, are those ones that are just kind of there and just kind of forgettable. And I think WrestleMania 15 kind of fits into that kind of structure, if you will. Now, this is a time in the WWF in 1999 that the tide has clearly changed and things are really starting to go the WWE's way. Sure, they're getting some negative publicity because of the violence and sexual content of their shows. Later on in the year, you get the Beyond the Mat documentary, which provides more so-called negative press to the WWF. But at this time, they're outdoing WCW in pay-per-view buys. They're outdoing WCW in the ratings. Things are definitely trending upward, and business is booming, and business is very big. Now, you can sit there and talk about who deserves credit for it. It doesn't really matter. I'm not here to assign credit or blame or anything like that. It's just a fact of the matter that the product was very entertaining at this time, and the company was white hot. It was electric. However, this show was not. And it's kind of funny when we go back and look at the Attitude Era, that stretch of time really from end of 1997 to, the middle portion of 2002, let's say. You had a couple of kind of real stinker WrestleManias in there, and one that I think, was disastrous for the business that I'll get to when I talk about WrestleMania 17. But WrestleMania 15 here was not that good of a show. What it does show you when you go back and watch it, though, is the fact that almost everybody had a story. And that was a good thing. And that was definitely a Russo element on the show that I frankly think the WWE lacks today. Is the fact that everybody had a purpose, everybody had something to do, everybody had a character, everybody had a story, everybody had a shtick or a gimmick. And that's good, I think, because no matter what, you're providing something for just about everybody to watch. And that's exactly what you had with the WWF at this time. And it's also apparent to see just how incredibly talented this talent roster was. I mean, it was a really deep, talented roster and a really deep, talented time for all parts of the business. WCW had a deep, talented, loaded roster. ECW had a deep, talented, loaded roster for what they were doing. Everybody was loaded. The talent in the business at this time was very good. And even here you can see with some of the things they were doing on this show, you saw some elements of that, but a lot of the show, frankly, is just kind of forgettable. The matches aren't all that good, and even though they had good stories going into it, it just kind of leaves you feeling like, bleh. Like you had the opener, the triple threat for the Hardcore title, Hardcore Holly beating Billy Gunn and Al Snow. You had the Hardcore title here. Hardcore Holly was a good Hardcore champion, but again, this match was kind of forgettable. There are much better and much more entertaining things to come with that Hardcore title, that's for damn sure. The tag team title match, which was set up on that Sunday Night Heat show, where you had that 21-man battle royal to determine a number one contender to go on and face the champs Owen and Jeff Jarrett here for the tag titles. Of all people, you had D'Lo Brown and Test. This was just really odd. And this match, as a result, kind of didn't work. Now, one of the few things I ever enjoyed about Jeff Jarrett's time in professional wrestling has been his alliance, his partnership with his good friend Owen Hart. I actually thought this was a perfect position on the card for a Jeff Jarrett, a great position for an Owen Hart. And when you go back and watch it, you could see the chemistry between these two, and you could see how it really worked. You threw a Deborah into the mix, and there you go. A really good tag team, a bit of an underrated tag team. And this is coming for somebody that really is truly a Jeff Jarrett hater, and I think everybody clearly understands that, and that has been clearly established. But this match didn't really work, and D'Lo Brown and Test as a tag team was just incredibly awkward and bad. But speaking of awkward and bad, one of the dumbest things that the WWF ever did, ever, and I emphasize again, ever, was the whole Brawl for All concept. Here is a concept here where you were trying to incorporate some tough man elements, some MMA elements perhaps, some boxing elements, whatever you want to refer to it as. I always compared it to the WWF's version of the tough man competition. So now you are taking what is real and putting it into a scripted show where everybody knows it's scripted and believe that you're not really hurting themselves. So now you're sitting there and asking people, your workers, to sit there and go be a part of this, do real shoot fighting that is real, that everybody is going to think is fake anyways. That makes absolutely no fucking sense. And it wasn't like there was going to be this tremendous monetary payoff or anything like that. This was just, to me, sounds like one of those Russo gimmicks that really wasn't well mapped out, wasn't really well planned out, and as a result, just ended up falling flat on its face. Guys were getting hurt, guys were getting injured. You know, this was really the ruination of Dr. Death Steve Williams in the WWF, and that's a sad thing because there were some good feuds, some good programs, namely Stone Cold Steve Austin, that we never got because of this stupid concept. And then, of course, here comes Butterbean in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and he knocked Bart Gunn the fuck out. He said, Bart Gunn goes, it's funny for its pure comedic values, but this was a dumb concept and had no business being in the WWF at that time or ever, and was an incredibly ridiculous part of the WrestleMania 15 card. Then you get this match to determine who's going to be the special guest referee for the main event. And this, this has so many Attitude Era elements in it. If it was there today, it would just be stupid and people would crap all over. But Mankind beat Paul White. Yeah, Paul White, not the Big Show. Paul White by disqualification. And now you were positioning it where Mankind could get his revenge on Vince and Shane and the corporation and the corporate champ The Rock in the main event. And that's all fine and good. But again, another kind of just forgettable match. Then you get the Four Corners elimination match for the Intercontinental Championship, and everybody always remembers Jericho and him just pooning Road Dogg and talking shit about Road Dogg, and that's all fine and good. But then you get to the actual match here, and again, it just kind of was what it was. I always liked the Val Venus gimmick, though. Hello, ladies. The Big Balboski here. That was always kind of cool. Goldust at this time, being aligned with Blue Meanie and Ryan Shamrock, was kind of like, whatever. Here's Ken Shamrock, and here's the Road Dogg. It was kind of an interesting choice that you had Road Dogg here as your champion, and he ended up leaving the champion too, which was always kind of surprising to me because you were going to go in a different direction. You would have thought, it is whatever. Again, another kind of forgettable match. One of the better matches on this card was Kane versus Triple H. But even this match here didn't have a clean finish and is just kind of forgettable in the grand scheme of things, to be honest. You have a women's championship match, Sable taking on Tori. This was kind of brutal. This was kind of bad. Definitely something that you don't really need to go back and watch. One really good match on this show, though, that always gets kind of left out, and I don't think forgotten about, but it gets left out in terms of when people talk about at least good or really good WrestleMania matches, was Shane McMahon versus X-Pac in their match for the European Championship. I always liked the European Championship because they seem to have good champions, by and large, hold this belt. And this feud between Shane McMahon and X-Pac over this European Championship was outstanding. And as you go back and watch this match, you sit there and you think to yourselves, my God, that's how good Shane McMahon was. He was really a good performer. And he could go out there and do some of the things that his dad can do in terms of from a psychology standpoint, but he could do so much more from a physical standpoint. Shane McMahon was legit, man. I tell you this much right now. If next year at the Royal Rumble, entrant number 30 was Shane McMahon, the roof would blow off the fucking joint. If at WrestleMania 30 in the main event, Shane McMahon interfered on behalf of Vince and helped Daniel Bryan become WWE World Heavyweight Champion, a roof would blow off of that place. And it's always fun to go back and watch here because you're like, man, this is an example here of how shit used to be good. A European title feud, a third-tier belt, and this was one of the best feuds entering the show, and it ended up being one of the best matches on the show. It's always funny to go back and watch this stuff. It really is. But then we got what I thought was easily one of Taker's worst matches at a WrestleMania. This Hell in a Cell match between him and Big Boss Man. It just never worked for me. It didn't work then. It doesn't work now. I always thought it was bad. As the years go by, I realized just how bad this match to me truly was. There was a story here, but you almost forget about it because it's like, oh my God, this was that bad. And by the end of the year, they were giving the Big Boss Man a title shot with tears that are soaked. I'm sad to hear that your daddy finally croaked. Big Show, you're a bastard, as your mama said so. Fucking Boss Man was awesome in this role. Unfortunately, it didn't really work again with this match. And then at the end, as you're raising the cage and you got Boss Man hanging, this was an example maybe of doing something that was unnecessary, going too far, and all the while the match kind of was the drizzling shits. And then we get to the main event, which to me is the real saving grace of this pay per view, if there is one. It was Stone Cold Steve Austin versus The Rock. The two hottest guys in the company, the two biggest stars in the company, squaring off in the main event of WrestleMania 15 for the WWF Championship. And, this comes off of the heels of Austin and McMahon entering 1-2 at the Rumble in 99, and McMahon winning it. And then they had their match at St. Valentine's Day Massacre, where Austin ends up winning because Paul White debuts and throws him through the damn cage, and Austin lands on the ground. So McMahon loses his title opportunity to Stone Cold. And this is what the WWF used to do really well. They did a lot of the shock TV very well, but they also did have a great ability to interweave so many different things and have so many different moving parts. It was really good at this time, and it's maybe one of those things where it was a combination of Vince Russo and Vince McMahon, along with others working together, where Russo maybe would come up with something, McMahon say, yeah, let's tone it back, but you would still get a lot of the basic idea. Whatever it is, it worked. Right before this, obviously, as you had the great freaking beer truck incident on the Raw before this WrestleMania 15, so you were raring to go for this match. And when you think about WrestleMania main events, this is one of those matches that truly lives up to the definition of being a WrestleMania main event. I think about matches like Hogan and Andre. I think about Hogan and Savage, Hogan and Warrior, and Brett versus Shawn at WrestleMania 12, and Austin versus Shawn at 14. This is another one of those, even more so than maybe a WrestleMania 14. This one felt like a main event of a WrestleMania should. This was a no disqualification match for the WWF Championship. And to me personally, out of the three WrestleMania matches that Austin and The Rock had, this is still my favorite, and I still think this is the best. It didn't get quite as convoluted. It didn't get quite as ridiculous as a 17 or a 19. I think right here at WrestleMania 15, this was the best of their three matches. And Stone Cold ended up beating The Rock. Imagine that. The only time he was going to lose to The Rock was when it didn't matter anymore in 2003 at WrestleMania 19. But this was, at least if nothing else, the match that ultimately saved this show to me from being one of the worst WrestleManias of all time because it delivered. When your main event delivers, it makes up for so many other things that can go wrong on that card. And like I said before, this was largely a forgettable show to me. I actually have to go back and watch it every year to remember a lot of what actually happened. The things that really stand out to me that I always remember is Butterbean knocking Bart Gunn the fuck out in that ridiculous Brawl for All concept. I remember Shane McMahon and X-Pac in their title match, and I remember how bad Taker Big Boss Man was, and I remember Stone Cold and The Rock main eventing this show. So 2 out of the 4 things that I always remember about this show, no matter what, are not good. That means this was not a good WrestleMania, but it did just enough, and they gave me just enough with that main event to truly save it, like I said, from being one of the worst manias of all time. And I love when you have that special attraction at a WrestleMania where it feels like a main event of your biggest show of the year should. And when I go back and watch it, one of my favorite main events to go back and watch through WrestleMania history is right here. Stone Cold Steve Austin versus The Rock at WrestleMania 15. More so than 17, and definitely a lot more so than their match at WrestleMania 19.